Rick, the most recent result we have in is that across the United States, with results in thus far, Jimmy Carter leads with 51% of the votes. Gerald Ford has 48% of the votes. At this point, still no surprises. The states that were supposed to go a particular way did in fact go that particular way. That 51% popular vote for Carter translates into 67 electoral delegates. For Ford, that's 28 electoral delegates. And once again, that is no surprise at this point. None of the big states have reported in. Polls are closing. The second batch of polls are closing right now. It's 8 o'clock. And in Harris County, votes right now for Ford and Carter have gone 62% for Ford, 36% for Carter, and that's with about, about 1/30th of the votes from Harris County, and so that's not real important yet, but as expected, Harris County is going toward Ford. Other results in Harris County, for Senator, Alan Steelman leads at this point with 54% of the vote. Lloyd Benson has 45% of the vote, and that's once again strictly within Harris County. Also a Harris County election for U.S. Congress. Ron Paul leads with 58% of the vote, and Bob Gamage has 42. The Rice precinct, precinct 361 has closed. That's Rice and the immediate area around it. And Gerald Ford won convincingly, 610 votes to 350 votes approximately for Jimmy Carter. Alan Steelman was the victor in this Rice area with 650 votes to Lloyd Benson's 282. And Bob Gamage defeated Ron Paul in this part of his district, 597 to 302. We'll have percentage breakdowns on that after we have a little bit of time to get everything organized. Once again, the winners in the Rice area, Ford, Steelman, and Bob Gamage. Right now we'll go to Stan Barber and Dr. Gil Cuthbertson of the Rice Political Science Department for a little commentary.
Hello, I guess we're in here. Yes, we are. We are live. Okay, get everything going here. Lee, if you're listening, you've got two calls on 4088 and on the hotline that you need to take care of immediately. Dr. Cuthbertson, have you seen anything that particularly surprises you thus far?
Well, it's early yet. Of course, the votes from the forks of the creek, so to speak, aren't in, and those may be the votes that count in the final analysis. Whenever I do these election returns, I remember William F. Buckley's statement. The election was full of anomalies, and some of them won. Those votes from the forks of the creek, places like Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, may ultimately tell the results of the election. Of course, we waited through the small hours in 1948 for that farm vote to come in. Farm vote never came, and we may be doing the same thing again this year. This evening I have with me Mr. Joel Laser, outstanding political science major, winner of T.C. Edwards Fellowship in American Democracy from Rice, and I'm going to ask Joel what he thinks about those Rice returns as far as anomalies are concerned.
Well, from what we can see, it seems like the campus polls we had were a pretty good indicator of what was going to happen here at Rice with a huge turnout. Although Carter and Benson seem to be winning in Texas according to the major networks. At Rice, Carter had 357 votes, Ford 610, Benson had 282, and Steelman 641, so Rice seemed to go about as conservative as the polls had expected.
Do you have any feeling for why Rice students turned out in such large numbers today? Anything?
It was nice weather.
Any new motivations?
I'll probably get the same response that you get all over. The election seemed pretty close, so people seemed to think that their vote would count a lot more, and it was a nice day out.
Yes, that's what Dr. Meyer's been telling us. That's what I had to say this afternoon. Pleasant weather and a sense that votes were going to count a little bit more. I think those Rice returns are very interesting, though, because they don't show any pattern, at least to the extent that Ford is winning by a tremendous landslide, so is Steelman. And, of course, that could be, or could have been predicted. But on the other hand, Ron Paul, who was identified as a conservative candidate along the line, losing pretty badly to Gamage. In other words, the combination of Ford and Gamage. How do you see that?
Well, I think the people at Rice refuse to become too extremist, and that's the image Dr. Paul seems to have projected. An extremely conservative individual, and just a little bit too much for the Rice people to believe.
Well, that must be what the trouble was with Benson also. Now, how about the Carter support on the Rice campus? Why do you think it's so weak? Do you think that there's any distrust of Carter, or what's the problem with Carter nationally?
Let me jump in here at this point and introduce the third person who's in the room. David Butler of KTRU News is here also. I guess he feels like he can't say anything since no one knows he's here. But David, you certainly may jump in and say something if you want to.
No problem. They seem to be doing pretty well without me at this point.
Okay. Go. Do you have any idea? In looking at the situation, lengthen it out, stretch it out. All right, I'm going to stretch it out because I've been instructed by our news director to stretch it out. Looking at some of these results, Bob Gamage, when he was down here on our So Now You Can Vote series, I don't know if any of you heard that particular series. I'll speak up so you can hear me, Dr. C. I'll turn down my levels so it doesn't peg my meter. Anyway, this is going to be a wild night, folks, for those of you who don't know. Anyway, when Bob Gamage was down here, there was a lot of discussion on his part on the extreme point of view that Mr. Paul took, that he was so much of an idealist that he was not to be believed. Now, at Rice University, there are a lot of people who apparently believe this, looking at the results as they seem here, but there is a libertarian faction on campus. And I was just wondering if the number who did vote for Paul are just as libertarian faction, or is it something else? Is it just extremism, or what?
Well, of course, Paul's victory over Gamage in the short-term race in April could not have been identified solely with the libertarian interest, although I think Paul has libertarian sympathies. At the same time, he is a more or less conservative Republican. So I think the combination of Ford and Gamage at about the same percentage is a very unusual sort of thing. Of course, they must see some association between the two of them, and it may indeed be a credibility gap which exists between the real Carter and the candidate and the real Paul and the candidate. Hard to tell.
Okay. What were some of those other results? I caught some of them, but I didn't catch all of them. Ford came out over Carter, and Stillman came out over Benson. Now, that's an interesting thing. Benson being the incumbent Democrat, being beat out by Stillman. Was that just solely Republican influences, or was that something else?
No, Stillman has good support on the Rice campus. Ed Emmett, who was formerly president of Lovett, is Stillman's campaign manager, and he's made sure that Stillman has had a great deal of exposure on the Rice campus. Tom Gerleman, a lot of boys around campus have been working very hard for Stillman, and they have a very fine campaign organization which has made the difference in the Stillman vote.
All right, I think I'm going to be going back to the newsroom now. I think we're going to have some more results and some more informative things from Lee Hochberg, so we'll go back there right now.